everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Coaching Call podcast. On this podcast, we'll cover various types of coaching by trainers in sports, martial arts, fitness, and business. We'll discuss each coach's methods to getting the most out of their respective athletes or clients and how they attempt to change the platform in which they coach. Join us on a fun adventure as we discuss unique coaching styles. Coaching is a universal part of how we get others to get something done. Join your host, Raphael, and his guests on this unique journey in coaching.
Hi, I'm Sifu Raphael, and this is the Coaching Call podcast. If you enjoy this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. This episode was made possible by listeners like you. Good morning, David. How are you today?
Good morning, Sifu. How are you today?
My friend, I am exceptional every day, trying to get a little bit better.
You know, it's funny. When you say it, I actually believe it. So thank you for that.
I appreciate it. But here's the thing. I don't want to be the same guy I was yesterday. So every morning I ask for a download from God and I say, how can I be better? How can I make today better than I did yesterday? And look, you've already helped with that. So thank you.
Oh.
I want to get to know you, and we're going to basically go to your childhood. I'm going to bring you way back, my friend.
Wow.
Tell me where you were born, and before the age of 10, who would you say were your biggest influencers?
So I was born in Jackson Memorial Hospital, room 362. And the reason I know that level of detail.
You're the first person who's ever told me that. I love it.
And if I want to go into the star alignment or anything else like that. But anyway, the reason I know that is because it was actually on my adoption documents. So I was adopted into my family. And very, very thankful that even with all the chaos, as you know, and if as a family member, whether you're born by blood or not, there's the family dynamic. And we moved when I was 4 years old from Miami to actually Fort Lauderdale to the Florida Keys. And that's where I spent most of my growing up years on a place called Big Pine Key. And literally I did the math, Sifu, where I said, how much time have I spent underneath the water or in the water or on the water compared to, just living on dry land? And I will tell you, it was amazing that other than sleep, I spent the majority of my life in and on the water. It was amazing because that's what we did down there. From scuba diving, free diving, tropical collections, spear fishing, truly a remarkable living experience. And in our canal system, there were actually two bottlenose dolphin that I grew up with, Sue and Doll, who were actually one of the last living, the last living person to be able to own bottlenose dolphins in the continental United States was a lady named Betty Brothers, who was a remarkable woman that owned so much real estate in the Florida Keys that she actually owned these two dolphins. And that was the last person who could do that. So I grew up on the flipper show. Right. I mean, just after school, we literally took off our clothes, dove in the water with Sue and Dawn, played with them for an hour before we went home for dinner and stuff. God. And so growing up in that kind of place, it can be really challenging as well, because you've got this vacation mindset, because everybody's coming down there for vacationing. And I was watching everybody kind of get in that mode. And there's this special time that happens when you're in vacation mode. Everything just kind of slows down, right? The rest of the world's buzzing at 10,000 miles an hour, but you're really slowed down. And the opportunity for me was to be able to start talking to people, just getting to know them, and found out what made them successful. And that was kind of my interview process as a kid. That was growing up. My influences were all these strangers that were very wealthy, very, not necessarily happy, but very rich and wealthy to be able to take their where they were living and their money they made and come down there for vacations. So, of course, my parents were a major influence in my life, but growing up, those tourists were the biggest influence, I can tell you. And a lot of the life lessons and principles that I understand today and experience come from that time.
Incredible. I mean, the fact that you even remember what room it was that also in Florida, the actual hospital?
Yes, Miami.
I always say things in life happen for a reason.
Mm.
It was a gift that your adopted parents saw you.
Yes.
It was an opportunity that they were looking for the right person, and you were looking for the right parents, right? So you
Yes.
found each other, right? It's incredible how God sets things up.
Mm.
Um, I'm just curious, did you ever want to know your biological parents?
For me, my own personal experience, I never sought that family members out. I've heard, stories about my biological mother who was very young and she is in college and just really didn't have the resources to be able to bring a child on by her own kind of stuff. And thank goodness she, decided to put me up for adoption. And I will tell you, because my parents handled it when I was very young about understanding this adoption process, I got the experience and I chose the meaning behind that was that I was chosen by them.
Mm.
Now, I will tell you, I've met other adopted people in my life that have been very angry with their biological parents for giving them up. And this, Sivo, is a fascinating opportunity to start realizing that as human beings, we have this amazing gift given to us by God through free will that we get to create the meanings of things. So an event happens in our lives, but we get to choose the meaning. And that's our real superpower, a superpower that the people who are successful on this planet have remembered, and a superpower that the folks who are not being successful have forgotten. So being able to remember that gift, that any event happens, you get to determine the meaning of that, is a remarkable thing, remarkable gift.
It is. And thank you for pointing out the fact that some people don't understand the gift
Mm.
that you were given. And it's very interesting. And when you talked about the other people who influenced you besides this I'm going to say young lady who had these dolphins, because her vision was incredible. I can only imagine. She must have been an incredible woman. And the fact that she allowed the neighborhood kids to jump in and swim with them and have an incredible time. Wow.
Yes.
What a life you must have had, and the excitement of just coming home and getting in the water with them, right?
Well, talk about, something we call a compelling future, something to look forward to, right? I mean, every day after school, you couldn't wait. So it was a 45-minute bus ride back to our hometown from our high school. And that whole time you were just thinking, man, I cannot wait to get in that canal and see what they're up to today. So yes, fascinating time for sure.
That is pretty cool. So how old were you when you first started swimming?
Literally 4 or 5 years old. I mean, that was my thing that I was really good at. Holding my breath was something I really challenged myself with. But most of the time, because scuba was such a young art when I was that young, there wasn't a lot of activities around that until I got a little bit older. But I do believe my actual date of certification for my first certification for scuba diving was 12 years old. And I took the test and everything else like this passed. And at that time, there wasn't this requirement of being 16 like it is today, I believe. Right. And so I got my scuba diving license when I was really young, and I took full advantage of that, man. I was in the water constantly. And coincidentally enough, being an Aquarian, that starts to make sense, right?
You didn't grow any webs, right? No webs on.
Not that I can discuss with other people. So
I love the fact that you talked about the tourists, that they were influential, because maybe you saw their wealth, but it didn't matter to you because you had your own wealth, right? Swimming with the dolphins. I mean, people pay tons of money to do that now, right? Yes. That was a freedom that you had, and maybe you didn't recognize it until later on, right? After you're 10 years old and so forth, what was some of the bigger impacts in your life when it came to people closer to you, besides your adopted parents? Did you have other brothers and sisters, uncles, aunts, anybody like that?
It's funny being down in the Florida Keys. We were kind of separated from the rest of the family group, which was up in Fort Lauderdale, Miami, Tampa, the rest of the panhandle of East Coast, West Coast, Florida. So I didn't have as much impact, but I will definitely tell you that my grandfather had a very big impact on me, just his loving nature. And it's funny because I didn't realize it at the time, but so many of our role models in our life are teaching us one of two lessons, either who we are or who we are not. And it's a fascinating way to take a look at that. So my grandfather taught me both sides of things because he was such a remarkable dreamer. I mean, he was just so immersed in dreaming that I think many of his dreams didn't ever come to fruition because he was busy dreaming about stuff. And he didn't build the structure to be able to have that experience. And that is what I do as a coach today, is because I see the pain, because here's the man I adore. I love him. And he's struggling so mightily about, here's this amazing vision he has, and yet it isn't coming to fruition. He isn't experiencing that. And just the feelings that came from that, the sadness, the depression that came from that was overwhelming. And so in an interesting way, that influenced me to be able to say, not for me. I'm not going to live that dreamer life. I love to dream, Sifu, but dreams without structure become nightmares. And so I want to be able to help people build that structure, because if you are setting goals like most of us are doing here in January, and most of those goals fade away, is there a structure for goal setting? Is there a recipe? And by the way, the answer, of course, is yes. Well, what is it? How do I do that? And that term then becomes a structure that I can then continue every single year. And probably one of the reasons why I've been so successful, rich, and wealthy is simply because I know how to structure that goal. And that came from my realization from my grandfather, who had these amazing dreams and vision, but didn't put the structure in place to create and manifest them.
Wow. I love the fact that your grandfather was a dreamer and that you saw that. But everybody always says, if you're going to dream big, if you're going to dream big, right? But a lot of people, that's like you said, your grandfather, all he did was dream and didn't take the actions necessary to make them come to reality. And I love the fact that you're helping people understand that, hey, a dream is good, but guess what? Actions speak louder.
Yes.
Without your actions, you have all this but a dream. And dreams fade, don't they? How many times has anybody here listening to us, you at home, you've had a dream, and by 10 o'clock in the morning, you're like, oh man, I can't fully remember that dream. What's going on, right? That happens to you too? What?
Absolutely.
It's not just me. It's not just me. But if I have, and I've had this happen also, David, I've had a dream where I've woken up in the middle of the night and I started writing.
Yes. Awesome.
I've gotten titles of books. I've gotten chapters of books. And people say, how come you don't have any books out there? I said, because nobody needs to read them yet. They're not ready. But I've written them. And it's come to me in my sleep. I reached out recently to a friend of mine who I never imagined I would have dreamt of him and his parents. And the dream was how much his parents loved him.
Wow.
That was an out of nowhere dream.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't hold it. I didn't just say, oh, that was a good dream. I reached out and told him. And he was like, wow, thank you. My parents do love me so much, but it's nice to know that you even were thinking of us, right? And I didn't go to sleep going, please let me dream of my friend and his parents. It just so happened, right? It was a download, if you will. And I needed to get it out, right?
Yes.
Because one of the things that I do, and I can almost imagine you probably do the same thing, is that I know that when I'm sleeping, my mind is still going. So I'm going to have my mind work. Hey, listen, it's gonna work anyway. Yes. So why don't I guide it? And I asked for guidance. I asked God to give me my downloads in my sleep, to give me the guidance so I can become better than I was yesterday.
Yes, sir.
And I do that every night.
Nice.
And that was the download that night. And so many times we don't take action, even in our actual dreams, ones that we have no control of.
What's interesting is neuroscience is teaching us so much that we thought we knew has been completely wrong, right? About how our brain really works. And that's the fascination I have. Sorry, here's the obsession I have. And that is,
I love it.
I know there's these 3 dimensions: spiritual dimension of the universe, this physical plane that we live in, and us as humans in our interaction. And I'm obsessed with how those 3 things integrate with each other, how they balance each other, how they work. Because I absolutely know through my studies and my own personal experience, that a loving God would never put me on this planet without some kind of guide, without some kind of structure, without some kind of ability to be able to come and do what I'm supposed to do here. I knew that had to exist. And because of that belief system, I went out and discovered the structure that already exists for us to be successful in that place. And one of the fascinating things you just talked about, the word download, it has all kinds of fancy words of channeling and, I'm being taken over by a different entity. Man, this is frequency and energy we're talking about, that you are able to download information for other people because we're all connected in that way. So I went a little bit further when I'm a business coach, right? And clients of ours struggle with solutions. Like, I need an answer to this problem. They're constantly doing that. What's this? And we call those decisions, but they're really about, hey, problem, solution, problem, solution, problem, solution. Right. And do you know, Steve, when those problem solution dynamics ends, when you transition, then there's no more problems.
That's it. It's all gone.
So part of the game here is being able to understand there's going to be problems and solutions. So when I was growing up and living my life, and I was living this remarkable life of real estate and wealth and cars and women and all these things that should have made me happy, I was completely depressed. And the reason why was because I was using my ego to solve problems that were happening for me. And it was just redoing. And by the way, in martial arts, you know this, Sifu, that whatever energy you put out there is what you get back. We train this stuff, man. It's ingrained in every cell of our body. So it's difficult for someone who's not in the martial arts to have an inkling maybe of what I'm saying. We call it discipline, but this is imbued in us, right? It just says, hey, for every action, there's an equal opposite reaction. Fast, speed in Kung Fu, whatever. It's about this idea that whatever you put out there, you get back. And so I was like, well, what's causing that? And this frequency is what keeps coming through. Right. What if I could find a way to be able to get access to real source, a place where those solutions already exist? And in quantum mechanics, they call this realm of pure potentiality. What if a human being could actually get access to that sphere of knowledge of all things, all solutions, all possibilities? If I could wait a minute, we're already doing that. That was my grandfather. He was already downloading the dream of information through him. He was my first example of watching that. Right. But just downloading the information, it's the action you take about it, like you did, brother, that makes that things manifest. So I just love the way you just put that together so beautifully in that prime example of, yes, I have to download it. And by the way, writing it down, oh, thank goodness. Because when we do something that every one of us as humans do, we forget. Writing it down and then creating a plan of action to be able to take care of that, build that structure, and then take action upon that. What a beautiful thing.
Yeah, journaling is huge for me.
Yes.
I'm gonna go back to the tourists when you were a kid. It sounded to me like you became a tourist.
Great observations.
With your wealth, all the cars, the women, all these different things. When did you realize? And then I want to go back to your childhood a little bit. When did you realize that you didn't want to be a tourist anymore?
So, yeah, as a matter of fact, I took the tourist concept and was truly an observer position where you don't have a lot of emotion into it. And I moved the observer position into a voyeur kind of thing where I was excited about everybody's action, but I was watching them live this life, but I wasn't experiencing that life. And that was the moment, Steve, that I was like, no more of that. I'm not going to be watching everybody else's success. I've got to be able to create the success for myself. And I know there's this amazing story that we have that somewhere, some along the line, that something's going to come and save us. Well, I learned at a very young age that there's one person on this planet that's here to save me, and that's me. I'm supposed to be doing that. Now, I co-create that with the universe and a figure for me, God, but that creation is about my wanting to be able to save myself. So there's a great phrase that says, you've got to be involved in your own rescue. Mm-hmm. And that's when I finally turned that around and said, okay, now I have the structure. Now I have this understanding of this. I've got to go and experience that. And that's what I set on the journey to do.
Love it. Love it. You talked about martial arts. You talked about wealth, cars, women, all these different things that most people consider wealth. Mm. But you also mentioned that it wasn't making you necessarily happy, because a lot of people say, I will be happy when I have this, or I have that, and this, and that. I can't be happy. I'm so focused on, but they stop living in the now. Talk to me about what motivated you to even start martial arts.
So in most things in life, there's these three types of motivation, right? Pain, pleasure, inspiration. Mine was definitely pain because I was being bullied. I was in elementary school, high school. And it was interesting because as I really look back at the time, and I've talked to many teachers about this, I wasn't actually afraid of getting hurt. It was the most, because the bullying with my father actually started at home. So he and I had a very emotionally, mentally, physical relationship kind of stuff. So by the time I was really reaching school where other kids were doing that kind of stuff, I really wasn't afraid of that anymore. I'd been in that moment of feeling that fear and that anxiety, that stuff that comes from that. And I'd really moved by that. What I was really afraid of was actually hurting the other person. So I would actually not fight them so that I didn't hurt them. And I really had to get past that to realize that, hey, there needs to be some balance in this relationship. So that was really kind of the turning point for me to really understand the motivation is like, hey, why get involved in martial arts? Interestingly enough, much like the characters in the book of Swords of Illumination that we've written and published, that it's sometimes you start on a journey for a reason and then only find out that it's for a completely different reason. Mm-hmm. So my initial, investment in martial arts was I wanted to, beat people up so they stopped beating me up. And in the very short period of time, and when I finally started realizing it was my real essence for learning martial arts was to stop fighting myself. Because when I stopped fighting me, as I stopped fighting everybody else, right? What you bring to the party. If I want to guarantee there's brownies at the Christmas party, what do I bring to the Christmas party? Brownies.
Hello.
So yes. If I want to stop some event, then I have to stop doing it internally because everything going on in here is manifesting at some level out here. So if I stop that part, then therefore I'm not participating in creating this frequency, this attraction for that kind of energy. And when I really got the handle of what I just said and really started experiencing it, my entire outside world shifted.
Wow. Beautiful. It sounds to me like you were talking about empathy coming along, right? And I have trained so many different masters in martial arts as well. And I've come across some who I don't think they ever stood in line for empathy. Because it was, how can I beat up my students to make me feel good? And I saw that a lot, and it was very disturbing. One of the things, like you, I'm not afraid of getting hit, and so one of my clients recently said to me, I'm not afraid of getting hit. said, well, congratulations. Now you're a martial artist. And he told me, but I train with another master and he doesn't like to get hit at all. And he told the master, he goes, so why are you a martial artist if you don't like getting hit? And it was, he didn't get a full answer. And I said to him, I said, well, maybe he still wants to be a master, but maybe he hasn't mastered it yet. And I think the empathy allows us to understand that in order for me to hurt you, I need to be able to get hurt, right? And it's a weird way of looking at things. And for me personally, I never like to hurt my students, but I encourage them to hit me,
Yes.
which they're a little taken back. And I'm like, you didn't hit me hard enough. They're like, what? I'm like, hit me harder because I need you to understand it.
Yes.
They're like, I don't want to hurt you. I'm like, I'll let you know when you do. Right. And it's that confidence also that I can see that you have. Tell us about the first time you took a class. What was that like, and what style did you start in?
So again, I was about, when I started diving, 12, 13, and that was exactly the same time where I finally had enough of the bullying. I wanted to be able to give back in some way, shape, or form. And of course, I grew up during the Bruce Lee time frame, kind of stuff. And watching this magnificent human being on the screen do these things, I was just in awe of that. So Shotokan Karate was my first choice of this. And convincingly enough, or serendipitously enough, the Chinese world champion was a teacher in the Florida Keys teaching that particular art. And that's, I'm sure, why I was drawn to it. I mean, he was a master of the world kind of stuff. Right. And I attended class for about 2 years on and off, and then really got serious in my last year of that. And then watched the situation you just talked about where he turned and kicked, and his wife and daughter were part of the class. There was a really small class, about 6 of us on and off kind of thing. Sometimes just being him kind of in the dojo. And he turned quickly and kicked her, and his own wife, he broke her arm. And I didn't see that remorse like you talk about, or the empathy or any of this stuff, because he was being this teacher, this thing that he had been taught to be, about how he had to stand. And here is his love of his life, his wife, kind of stuff. And she's sitting there with a broken arm. And that moment changed everything for me. I left the art very shortly after that, because I was like, crap, if he's going to do that to his own wife, what's he going to do to me?
Exactly.
So there was a bit of motivation there. So I was out of the art for a little while. And then, of course, the movies again got me with Steven Seagal and this world of Aikido. And by that time, I'd really gotten kind of immersed in this idea of the samurai concept early on. So fascinating time to get involved in that art.
Beautiful, beautiful. It's very interesting. I had a conversation with a master, and he was telling me about, he was sparring with his student, and his student kind of hit him. So he went to show his student who's boss, and he broke the guy's nose. And I'm like, okay, our conversation is going to be ending really quick, because it's not the kind of people I want to be around. People that like hurting people just to show how amazing they are. You show how amazing you are by taking the hit and saying, good shot, and helping them, right? Having control. I always tell my younger students, I said, a black belt is somebody who shows control, doesn't hurt the other person. To me, that's a real black belt. Well, if you can hurt somebody, and you do it, you have zero control. Right? If you can hurt somebody and don't hurt them, oof, now you're a black belt.
It's funny, because there's actually scripture that confirms what you were talking about. It says, "The meek shall inherit the earth," and there's some different.
I read that yesterday.
Wow, totally by coincidence, right? But there's a different translation for that, which says, this meek, you think is very someone, shoulders forward, and they're like, oh, whatever you say. And that's not how the meek was actually presented when it was written. My understanding about that, what it really talks about is that he who knows how to use the sword, but chooses not to use the sword, is the meek. And that's where my training comes in, is, man, I know there's a dark side of me that exists. I want to make a friend of that. I want to embrace that. I don't want to fight it, because the more I fight it, the more it comes out in fighting you. And if I'm truly going to be of service to you, I got to stop fighting me first so that I can be there for you. And that's the real work that we kind of reverse. We want to go, I need to work on you and I need to change your behaviors because I can see so clearly what you need to change. And okay, play away. There's plenty of people on this planet doing that. I'm going to do something different.
Yeah, something beautiful. David, talk to me about the cars, the women, the wealth. When did that become a priority to you, and how did you start to accumulate any of it?
So early on, well, we talk about this thing at Samurai Success often, which goes back to your neuroscience, that we don't realize this, but there's this thing called programming that drives our choices, our decisions, our behaviors, and that programming is actually subconscious. It's not part of our conscious part of our brain. You and I having this very conscious conversation, there's a part of my brain back going, is what he's saying really real? Am I having the same experience? There's a whole different conversation happening inside your brain and our audience today. And that's perfectly natural to do that. The weird part about this is that our ability to manifest as human beings, which is singular, right? As human beings, no other species on the planet or galaxy can do that. It's a remarkable gift. We can manifest things. But that manifestation tool, taking nothing and turning into something, that tool actually comes from 95% of our ability is coming from our subconscious mind, not our conscious part of our brain. So as you and I are having these conversations, we're not manifesting things. It's the subconscious part that's manifesting. So if I want to truly be able to manifest something in the physical realm, which includes other relationships called women or for men or whatever you're going to do, cars, money, all these things have frequency. And your frequency then starts to attract those events in your life. And so what's interesting about that is if I want to have different things, then I need to be able to formulate that frequency. That frequency is designed, with your mind, your body, all these different aspects of things into a single focal point of behavior. And that behavior over time creates consistency. Consistency over time creates congruency. Congruency over time creates coherence. And this is where we finally connect with the universe. And that coherence, let's see if it was that point of the focal point of your attraction factor, which means at that point, after all those years of doing this thing, you create a frequency that is part of who you are. It actually starts to attract things to you. So that being said, the cars, the house, all these other things, early in my life, I had been programmed that these things were important. Where I got that from? Well, probably those tourists, right? That was the important part of that. It certainly wasn't from my parents. My parents had a very different set of principles and everything else. I wasn't listening to those. You know how that is when you don't. Yeah. Okay. At least I'm not alone in that one.
You're not alone at all.
So not listening to those really close to me, that law of familiarity kicked in. I was listening to all these other people, and I thought that was important. What I now know today is that neuroscience teaches us that by the time you're 7 years old, most of your programming around all subjects of life has already been predetermined. How you're going to attract house, your mate, money, how much love you're going to get, how much you're going to weigh. Even receding hairlines have impact by your belief systems. And those belief systems are stored in that programming, that subconscious programming. So I was like, well, if that programming is then determining my ability to manifest, what if I could plug into that programming? Oof. What if I could change that programming?
Get the whole universe.
Well, start at the end of the conveyor belt, man. If that's what's creating this, then let's get to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how you talk about frequency. Let me ask you a question on frequency. Your frequency is pretty high. I'm going to say it's exceptionally high. What happens to a person who decides to start to hang out with people who have low frequency?
So the great adage there is, show me your friends and I'll show you who you are. Where does that come from? Where do these it comes from frequency, man. It's interesting because that programming we talked about includes your beliefs and value systems, the way you ask questions, how and what you focus on, how you use your physiology to create emotions and feelings, and ultimately your behaviors. So that formula that I just shared with you is a way to understand how this stuff is actually manifesting. So importantly enough, though, is that whenever you hang out with somebody that you don't like, right? We have these things, what's called a feeling, Dave. I'm not liking this. What it really is you have to go back to the end of the conveyor belt and realize you just don't share the same belief systems. And because of that, you're going to have conflict. So in Maslow's hierarchy of really, seeking that security that we're all after first, and then building into belonging and all those things. Remember, if you're going to be part of a group, that belonging part of that means you have a shared belief system. And when you don't have that, you have conflict. So really understanding that frequency is happening all the time. You're not turning this thing off. There's no on-off switch. How you show up is because of your experiences, your beliefs, your values, and it shows up in what you might call personality or your behaviors. It's still a frequency, and you have control over that frequency. And that's the exciting part that I found out about. I was like, oh my gosh, yes, this programming is making me make choices and reactions to things, but I can change that programming. Does that make sense? Oh, yeah. And that's where the martial arts really helped me understand, because there's an adage that says practice makes perfect. Right. What I understand about it is practice makes permanent.
Love that.
Oh, and when you sit back and just that one thing and you really contemplate that for a moment, like I hope you guys are going to do, I will tell you, when you start realizing practice makes permanent, then you're going to start thinking, should I really be doing that? Because that's going to be permanent. Where does that permanency lead me? Mm-hmm. So show me your friends, right? Kind of stuff. People with low frequency. And by the way, there are plenty of people with low frequency on this planet. If you haven't noticed, I'm not observing something for you. You get to choose whether you're going to be part of that. Now, I understand there's situations, right? Environmental situations, but that person's my boss, Dave. This person's this. The choice still exists. And over time, if you're hanging out with people of different frequencies, higher than yours or lower than yours, they're going to affect you. Sorry, they're going to infect you.
Ooh, I like that better.
And if you allow that, it is still your choice. That's your power. That's what you really get to do, is say, no, I'm no longer going to be in this situation.
Yeah. It's very interesting. My mom used to always say to me, show me your friends, I'll tell you who you are.
Beautiful. You had a great guide already.
I've always listened to that. And I'm not a person who has many friends. I have tons of acquaintances. And there's a difference. But instead of friends, I'd rather have an ally. Right? Because an ally will be honest with me. A friend will tell me what I want to hear. And an ally will be, nobody, you're doing that wrong. Or this is terrible. Don't do that. Don't do that. And then a friend is going to go, oh, yeah, I think that's a good idea. You should do it. Because they don't want to hurt your feelings. I'd rather you hurt my feelings and tell me the truth. I'd rather hear the truth day in, day out. If somebody says, I don't like what you just did, okay, great. Why? What did I do that you didn't like? Oh, okay, that makes sense. Thank you. David, I'm loving our conversation. I want to get into manifestation, because you talk about the frequency, you talk about dreams, but without the actions, it's not going to happen. Also, by the way, your dog also agreed with you.
Did you hear?
And that was like perfect timing. Perfect timing. The dog's like, yes, yes, right?
Raving fans out in the
That's it. And so considering everything we've been talking about, even that first job that you wanted, you had to take action. Tell us about your career. Because your career will reflect on how you make your money, the choices that you are in. Because if you go and work for the boss who's a miserable person and you continue working there, you're going to have a miserable time. Maybe you're going to be, you say to yourself, okay, this is a miserable job, but I need to do it for the next 14 months. This is a stepping stone to the next one, right? But we have to have that plan in mind. Tell us about your ambitions and your plan that you shared, that you can share with us.
Going back to that moment where you create allies around you, that's going to be coming into our conversation with this, because the reason why you do not tolerate anything else but someone giving you that feedback is because from our very first part of our conversation, I want to purpose drive my life to be better tomorrow, better than I was yesterday. So you've surrounded yourself, because of your belief system, creates a frequency that attracts people that are going to give you that feedback. So you're doing it perfectly, man. That's what's so beautiful about this, is just starting to understand that. So as I go through my curriculum vitae, my resume, you're going to see that I had some really miserable bosses, really miserable, and it was fascinating to look back in that, because I was attracting that. What part of me was miserable? Well, a big part of me was miserable because I hadn't found my path yet. I hadn't found what I was after. I didn't find my passion yet. And until I did that, I was a miserable employee. By the way, if you had met me, you would be like, he's so, charismatic. He's so nice. He's so easy. But inside, I was miserable. And that is what we're talking about, is that you can put on this front face and say, but Dave, I'm really happy and I still have a jerk of a boss. What part of you stays there when you know you have a jerk boss? There's a part that still is unhealed inside of you that you want to work on. You're not going to be working on your boss. Your boss is who it is, she is, you're not in the behavioral modification business, because you can't invoice for it. Right? So we're busy spending all this time changing other people, when what we need to do is change ourselves. Because when I healed this part of me, when I finally said, hey, I'm not this miserable son of a gun anymore, then all of a sudden I stopped tolerating that in my business. I stopped hanging out with those people. So in a really interesting way, I was that person staying there so I could learn not to be that any longer. And because I'm stubborn, it took me a lot longer to get out of it. But I started off.
Thing, though.
What's that?
I said that was a good thing, because it taught you so many lessons along the way, I'm sure.
And that's a really great exercise for all of us to be able to do, is if everything happens for a reason, which I absolutely subscribe to, then everything happens for a reason. Whether you understand that reason or not, just know that the one singular reason that's always going to be there is that life event gives you opportunity for choosing and accepting who you say you are. When you understand that premise of things, then things become a lot clearer.
Yeah, absolutely. You've had an incredible career, from doing martial arts for 20 years and stopping, and now picking it up, and you've been doing it for the last 4 years. I am so happy for you.
Oh, thanks.
Because
can I explain that experience in one word?
Go for
Ouch. Ow.
Tell me why ouch. Why is that word so important there?
Because taking that time off, my brain had kind of gotten out of the martial arts mentality of things, the mindset that you really need to walk into the dojo with. And I had forgotten about how sacred that place is, right? How I need to take my backpack off and leave all my life concerns and all my worries. I need to leave that off the mat, because I was bringing them on the mat for quite a few months. And let me tell you, as you know better than I do, you cannot bring that, because that martial art takes my complete focus. And that's one of the things I love about motorcycling and or driving fast cars, racing cars, or going to the martial art. It isn't about the adrenaline rush. I know that sounds weird, but it's really about focusing on nothing else in the world but that moment. And I will tell you, as I do that, as I learn to do that better and better, my technique and my work, it becomes effortless. And so if it works so well in the dojo, what if it would work in my own life? And it does, of course.
Beautiful, beautiful. The ouch part that got me.
Yeah.
It's so. Let me put it to you this way: it baffles me when someone looks at a martial artist and they're like, they're not doing anything. It's not. They're wearing pajamas and they're just jumping around, right? But they don't understand the mental aspects, the communication that martial arts actually teaches you, how to read bodies, how to understand alignment, how to understand space, even because of the movement that we use. And earlier I said to you, before we started the show, I said that I love weapons because it truly teaches you how to move.
Mm.
And if you've never used a weapon, then you're missing something in your arsenal, right?
Yes.
So is it okay if we mention that you work for a big time celebrity in
Sure.
the realm of speaking?
Sure.
Would you mind telling us how you landed that opportunity?
So, working with Tony Robbins, when I was in politics, I came out of school, and it was right around 1991. Well, it was 91. That's when I graduated from college, and I graduated with a finance degree. And so, luckily enough for me, in 91, we were going through the savings and loan crisis. So banks were not hiring, and that was my projection. I was supposed to come out of finance, go into the banking world, do those things, and I had set everything up. See if about it. I had gone in politics, and the school university system was part of the political system. I got to know every chancellor I could possibly think of. I was thinking about recommendations. I mean, I was working the system. There was no doubt about it. And I came out, and I remember one of the 12 vice presidents of Sun Bank at the time. Now, remember, I don't know if you remember 1991 Miami, but it is cocaine cowboy mega place, right? So
I think one of my family relatives was part of that. I am Colombian, and wasn't Escobar part of that?
He was a major influencer for sure. Well, there were so many banks in Miami because of the cash that was available. They needed to keep building. I mean, skyscrapers of banks going up like crazy. And yet here, this massive shutdown on hiring people. And so I walked into that. So the universe was, keeping me from going there. So instead of going into banking, I got involved in politics and spent a number of years there campaigning and being a legislative aide, being the chief of staff of the Senate Appropriations Chairman of all of Florida, blah, blah, blah. And got involved in real estate right after I left politics because I realized politics was not the way to change the world, right? It was just they love the way things are. They want to keep things that way. So I left politics, got involved in real estate, and I worked for the guy that I was his business manager. And during the time, he became the number one selling real estate agent in the world. Now, his timing was remarkable at the time because we were selling Star Island, to Sylvester Stallone, Madonna, Prince, who rented from us, I think. But all these stars and basketball players and athletes were coming down to Miami to buy property, and we were selling it to them. So that's where all that money came from to be able to have access to all those things we had talked about, living in a multi-million-dollar house on the intercoastal or yacht, and all this other stuff, and driving fantastic cars down South Beach. Right. And so at that time, the gentleman I was working with really wanted to start a different venture, and he left real estate for a little while. So I went off and I was looking for this next opportunity. And I'd gone to a program in real estate that we were teaching strategies, this gentleman being the number one real estate agent in the world. And we were at this seminar, and I was teaching about team dynamics and he was teaching about selling. And we rocked the room, man. We were just on it. We were, people came up to us afterward. We're asking for autographs. And I mean, it was on. I'm 26 years old and I'm having this experience. And I'm just so proud. I'm total ego, man. I'm totally into myself. Like, how good am I? And then my life changed dramatically because in the background, a new person was being introduced on stage, and the place went crazy for the next hour. I mean, crazy, not the crazy we had presented, like crazy times 10. It was like we weren't even there. It was like we didn't even exist. Right. And I peeked behind the curtain to be able to see what the hell was going on stage. And there was this 6'7" giant guy standing there rowling up the crowd, and his name was Tony Robbins. So through my political connections, I found a way to contact his company and left him this voicemail message that I can't repeat on stage on here right now. But he called me back and said, okay, you cocky son of a gun, let's see how good you are. Because my team's actually in Miami right now. And if you can get past them, I'll give you an opportunity. So that's what happened. I actually met with this team in Miami. We did this video taping of me doing a presentation. They liked it and they knew they could train me. And they had a lot of work to do with me, believe me. And that's how I began my journey as a field sales representative for Tony for those years.
Wow. How long were you with the company?
About 2.5 years total. Interestingly enough, that time, the amount of stuff, the quality of life that I lived in those 2.5 years are like decades into days. So it was more like 5 years of experience in 2 years of time. It was just really remarkable opportunity. The people that I met, the amazing people that were in the part of that organization, the absolute social and psychopaths that I met during that time as well. Truly
Sure.
a balanced approach of ego and soul that I hadn't experienced before.
Wow. It's he does bring down the house, if you will.
Yes, he does.
I've heard of people being in his presence, like 500,000 people or 50,000 or whatever. I had the opportunity of being probably third row in with only 2,500 people. And he blasts the music, he comes out and he's bigger than life, right? And his energy is unparalleled. But one of the things is he tells people to stand up. And he goes, I need to see you, and da da da. And he's going on. And I'm like, well, how the heck is he going to see me back here? I'm in the third row. There's tons of people around. You know what I did? It was 2,500 martial. He did a special thing for the martial arts industry. It was 2,500 of us. And I said, how is he going to see me? I stood on my chair.
Nice.
I was the only one above everybody else. And the guy next to me goes, what on earth are you doing? I said, I'm being seen. And he's like, well, me too. So he stood up next to me, and it was just two of us standing there. And Tony points to us. He goes, that's what I'm talking about. Be seen, right?
Be seen. And
so many times, and like what you did, and you left him this voicemail. You needed to be seen. First, you needed to be, he heard you. Because if and you said you couldn't say it, if your message would have been like, hey, I just want to work for you, you would never have gotten a phone call back.
I almost fell asleep right there. So sorry.
But it's the impact of the way we communicate, the body language we use.
Yes.
It's everything, the energy that we bring. It's that caliber of, here I am. Take a look here, right? And you did that so brilliantly. Why did you leave?
Really was because my true answer was I'm a terrible employee. I really am. Because I just don't have the ability to not talk about my ideas. And not every owner wants to be able to hear that, or management team. And really it was just the conflict, not with Tony, but just with the management team that just said, hey, this wasn't a good fit for me. It was time for me to move on. And the universe was actually shoving me out the door because I really needed to create my own company, my own vision about stuff, and have that download come directly through me and put that into structure. So everything for a reason, right? There was really no blame or judgment about this stuff. It was just like, oh, what's the universe sending to me now? Oh, I need to go down that. I need to trust the process. And that's what I did. So leaving the company was difficult for sure, but it was the right thing to do, obviously.
For you, absolutely. My pastor recently said, he comes from Chicago, and a couple of years ago, him and his wife were like, we need to make a move. God is telling us we can't stay here anymore. So he was getting a download and he didn't know what it was. And he actually saw an ad for Long Island, New York. And it was a tiny little ad, and he goes, there's an ad. He screamed at his wife, who was at another level, and he screams down to her, and he goes, there's an ad in Long Island, New York. You think I should apply? She goes, why wouldn't you apply? It's calling you. Otherwise, you wouldn't have called me. You wouldn't have yelled from upstairs, should I do this? Do it. And he's now a pastor. He's been our pastor for the end of 2024, and he's a great guy. But it's, if you don't listen, and sometimes he moved away from his family, he moved away, he just took him and his wife and his youngest kid. He still has kids there and everything, but it was such a deep calling. And it sounds to me that that's what you had. You needed to do your own thing. I realized that myself. I think 1992, I totally been an entrepreneur. Right? I haven't worked for anyone since 92. And it's that calling that we get, it's not that we can't work for someone. It's the calling that we need to help others. Yes. And the only way to do that is by doing our thing, right?
Beautifully said, man.
Let me ask you, I love your SamuraiSuccess.com name. What inspired that name? It's going across the screen, everybody, so you can take a look and go check it out as well.
So interesting. I was actually in sales. So I remember reading several books, including Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. And I got on this kick of really creating a plan of action because I knew that I needed to be able to convince people. And I saw that I was really lacking in sales. So I purposely got involved in sales at a really interesting level called timeshare sales. So 90 minutes of someone coming in for a proposed cruise, you got me for 90 minutes, and I had to be able to translate that into things. Now, I will tell you that I met some really fun people that I'm still friends with today. So an interesting industry for sure that doesn't have the best reputation. And I really created some amazing friends for that because I decided to bring something different to the stage, which was, I'm just going to be honest. I'm just going to be as authentic as I can. If I don't get the sale, I was totally unattached to the outcome. And the success was remarkable. So it was a fascinating way to take a look at that. But during that time in sales, I read this amazing book called Samurai Selling. And in that book, it gave me the code that I was looking for. Now, remember, here I am with all these tourists coming down there, giving me these ideas and principles. And going back to your pastor story, that the gentleman who got that download of the newspaper article only followed through behaviorally, took action on it because of the mate he chose somewhere 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, or 2 minutes ago. That mate then said, you've got to, put things down. You've got to move. Without the mate, maybe he doesn't do that.
Right.
You just answered one of the most important questions. How is important is it the mate you choose? It's everything.
It is everything.
Because without her injection into the conversation, of course you're asking me, go do this. You're asking me about that kind of exactly what he needed to hear to take that action. Surround yourself with those people, man. That's the folks you're after because that changes everything. But taking this action plan, right, is so important.
I love how you said your mate, your partner, anyone, because when you're tired, when you're vulnerable, they have your ear.
Well said. When you're most vulnerable.
Yeah. When you're sick, when you're down, when you're happy, all these different things, if they're in your life. One of the things that I did a show earlier today on healing, right? And healing starts with you, but sometimes you need the help of others in order to heal, like a doctor or a friend or a prayer or whatever it is. What would you say, and we're basically at the end of our show. Thank you for your time today. What will you say if you, looking back in retrospect on your life, what was your most healing part for you?
healing part. And by the way, what a great word to be able to understand, because as we talked about before, if you really want to do something in 2025 exceptional to changing yourself and this planet, work on healing you. Now, maybe you don't want to use the word healing. Okay, fire, but work on you, invest in you, whatever term you want to give that. You're going to find that by healing the stuff that's inside of you, you can actually become much more present for other people. Because if you're not taking care of that inside, if you haven't healed that, as soon as we're talking about something and you say something that triggers that unhealed part of me, I go off on a different projection about, oh, what about this and how my feelings are hurt and how I'm going to, and I'm no longer part of the conversation. I will truly tell you that my most important healing came from the understanding of this. If you truly want to be in service of others, if you truly want to change this place, and I know a lot of us out there want to do that, then the first place you have to start is with you. You have to be the starting point. And many masters have said this. If you want the place to change, become the change. So let's take that literally and say, I'm going to invest in me in 2025. I'm going to do this healing work, because once I do that, I can truly be in service to you.
Love it. Love it. Be in service to you first. Right?
Which sounds selfish. And we've been programmed not to do that. Listen, we've been following this map of do not take care of you first, take care of everybody else first. And we are located now in this location, which we all agree that something has to change. But how did we get here is because of those principles and beliefs of not taking care of you. Now, we can take those to extremes. What I'm really talking about is not creating this life, quality, balance kind of stuff. I'm talking about really doing the work that's going to say, hey, I just got triggered by that event. I don't want to do that anymore. It doesn't represent who I am. How do I heal that one singular aspect? So when it happens again, and it will happen again, that I don't get triggered by it. I don't respond the same way. I don't react the same way because it didn't make me feel good about me. Take one thing that causes you to get emotionally out of control and work on it this year. It'll make a huge difference.
That's awesome. I love it. And I'm so happy that I'm talking to another selfish person as well.
Damn it, gotta add that to my resume. All right.
On my resume, selfish. Okay. I have to be selfish, right? It's just same thing. You know, the analogy of the airplane, you put the mask on first. We need to take care of us so we can take care of many. David, wow. I am so blessed that you took the time today. Tell us in 30, 45 seconds what people can expect when they come to samuraisuccess.com, and it's going across the screen as well.
Sure. That's a great place for reference tools to get to know us a little bit better. And I really highly encourage people, because we put, since February of this last year, 2024, we got involved in social media again. We have not done that in 27 years of marketing for Samurai Success. We've done no social media whatsoever. It's only been by referral. So it really promotes our coaches of getting the best performance for our clients, because if they don't like what we're doing, they're not going to refer us. So that's been our model so far. But now that we're expanding into much more global marketing strategy, there's a lot of videos and details about a lot of stuff we coach upon at that library there. So that's a great resource spot to get started, to get to know us a little bit better.
I love it. I love it. David, what a pleasure, my friend. Do me a favor, hang out. We're just going to say goodbye to everybody. Everybody, thank you so much for sharing your time with David and I. What an incredible human being. You got to reach out to him, right? He's going to help you be successful. He's a samurai, people. All right, everybody, have a beautiful day, and we'll see you soon.